Naranjana Yasoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yasoda Nandana Pradajana Ranjana Yasoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Vishabad Paramahansa Bhaktivedanta also the CC AC Bhaktivedanta Samshita Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shasti Gaur Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Govardhan, Shama Kunda Radha Kunda, Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadvip Dham ki jai. Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai. Samavetta Bhakta Vrindi ki jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to symbol devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatcharesha Tarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 10, Verse 9. Brahmana Uvacha Tvayoditam Vyaktam Avipralabdham Bhartu Same Syadyadi Virabharaha Ganturyadi Syadadi Gamyam Adva Piveti Rasauna Vidam Pravadaha. Brahmana Uvacha. The learned Brahmana Jadabharata spoke. Tvaya, by you, Uditam, explained, Vyaktam, very clearly, Vipralabdam, without contradictions. Bhartu, of the bearer, the body. Sa, that, may, mine, syat, it would have been. Yadi, if, Vira, O great hero, Maharaj Rahugana, Bharaha, a load, a gantu, of a mover, also the body. Yadi, if syat, it had been adigamyam, the object to be obtained. Adva, the path. Piva, very stout and strong. Iti, thus. Rasau, in the body. Na, not. Vidam, of the self-realized persons. Pravada, subject matter for discussion. Translation, the great Brahmana Jadabharat said, "My dear king and hero, whatever you have spoken sarcastically is certainly true. Actually, these are not simply words of chastisement, for the body is the carrier. The load carried by the body does not belong to me, for I am the spirit soul. There is no contradiction in your statements because I am different from the body. I am not the carrier of the palanquin, the body is the carrier. Certainly, as you have hinted, I have not labored carrying the palanquin, for I am detached from the body. You have said that I am not stout and strong, and these words are befitting a person who does not know the distinction between the body and the soul. The body may be fat or thin, but no learned man would say such things of the spirit soul. As far as the spirit soul is concerned, I am neither fat nor skinny. Therefore, you are correct when you say that I am not very stout. Also, if the object of this journey and the path leading there were mine, there would be many troubles for me, because they relate not to me, but to my body. There's no trouble at all." Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that one who is advanced in spiritual knowledge is not disturbed by the pains and pleasures of the material body. The material body is completely separate from the spirit soul, and the pains and pleasures of the body are superfluous. The practice of austerity and penance is meant for understanding the distinction between the body and the soul, and how the soul can be unaffected by the pleasures and pains of the body. Jadabharat was actually situated on the platform of self-realization. He was completely aloof from the bodily conception. Therefore, he immediately took this position and convinced the king that whatever contradictory things the king has said about his body do not actually apply to him as a spirit soul. So here we begin the response of Jadabharat to the chastisement of King Rahugana. And of course, what did the king do? He chastised Jadabharat for his the manner in which he carried this palanquin. You can say use sarcastic words. And in his response, Jadabharat is somewhat agreeing with the statements of the king, but in a more philosophical way. And his strategy is to show that actually, though the king is addressing Jadabharat as a body who may be strong or whatever, but clumsy or dull-minded or whatever, and slow. The fact is that we're not the body at all. Everybody is a jiva, a soul. And we see from Bhagavad Gita, the characteristics of the soul have got nothing to do with the characteristics of the body. So big or small or fat or thin, etc., don't apply to the soul at all. Of course, the soul cannot be affected by anything in this world. So therefore, in the second chapter, Krishna says you cannot burn, you cannot cut, you cannot drown, you cannot dry out, you cannot do anything with the soul in terms of material afflictions. So you can't use a knife or an earthly object to crush the soul or hurt it at all. You cannot wet it, you cannot drown it, you cannot use water to disturb the soul. You cannot use fire, you cannot burn it in any way. Wind, you cannot dry it out with the wind, blow it away or whatever. So the material elements have no effect on the soul at all. Whatever we think of as affecting us is only affecting the body. But true, as long as we identify with the body through ahankara and ignorance, then we will think, yes, the knife is cutting me, or the fire is burning me, or the water is drowning me, etc. So we will think that the material elements are affecting us when we have this false identity. So this false identity is not some fantastic thing, because we see it operates all the time. We can understand how it works very nicely. If you have a dream, and then you identify with the dream, and then you think, this is happening in a dream, you wake up, then you say, oh, it wasn't true. But as long as you're in the dream, you're identifying with that dream body and whatever happens to it. And so if a tiger chases you in the dream, then you get afraid and you start running away, but then you wake up, so, oh, it's only a dream. So you come out of that illusion, but while you're in it, you're identifying very much with that particular body. So that's the same with the body we have. As soon as we're born, we're identifying with this body, and it goes on until we die. Nevertheless, it's not true, but we don't wake up. That's the thing. We wake up from a dream, but we do not wake up from the material world. It's very, very difficult to wake up. Another example is a drama. In ancient times, they had dramas, and as long as a drama is going on, you identify with the characters in the drama, and particularly the hero. And if the hero gets hurt, then you feel hurt. And if the hero is victorious, you feel victorious. If the hero falls in love, then you fall in love. So you identify with the characters very much. And that's the same as we have in movies. You identify with the hero in the movie, and whatever he does, you identify with it. And that lasts as long as the movie lasts. When the movie's ended, then it's all, yeah, okay, it was only a fiction. And you walk out, and then you're back to normal again. And what you put your identity into that. So that's what happens in the material world with the material body. We identify everything here, but actually it's not us, because we're actually the Atma. So it is easy to get out of these temporary feelings of dreams or dramas or movies or whatever, because they're very temporary, and then you walk out of it and you're back to normal again. But this identity with the material body is very difficult to get out of. Once we're stuck in the body, we identify with it very strongly because we have this ahankara, the subtle body attached to us. So then we identify very strongly with our material body from the time we're in the womb even. Yeah? And then it lasts until we die. When we die, and then when people are leaving their body, then they may get an inkling that, I'm not the body. We have near-death experiences, and the people understand it. I'm not the body. They're looking at their body there. I'm different from my body. And then they come back to their body. So they get a temporary realization where it's all false identity. And in fact, the people that have these experiences often, because of that experience of understanding they're not the body, when they come back, they're completely different. They no longer involve themselves in all of the material pleasures, etc. They're more philosophical, more detached, and they understand that they're not really the body, and they act on that level. So that's, of course, maybe say beneficial for them. And the other way, of course, is simply by reading scriptures. We can understand not the body. That's chapter 2. But it doesn't register. That fact does not register unless we have faith. So if you don't have faith and you read the Bhagavad Gita, you can read the whole thing and you think you're the material body. If you have faith when you read the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna says you're not the body, you're the soul is eternal, it's not cut, it's not burned, it's not dried up. Then you say, okay, I accept that. So we get a little realization if we have faith and we accept the scriptures. Still, we're not fixed in that realization, so therefore we do have to ultimately develop a fixed realization that we are the soul, and then we get liberated from the material world. But that's a very, very difficult thing to do. As we see with the Gyanis and Yogis, to get out of that material conception is very, very difficult. So, in general, difficult because we are conditioned. And of course, in Sanskrit, it means we're in bondage. We're baddha. We're bound up. But Prabhupada often uses the word conditioned, which is a good word because it means that we're habituated to it. And because of the habituation, we cannot change it. So it's an automatic response as long as we're under ignorance and ahankar that we'll identify with the material body, we'll try to enjoy the material world, we'll suffer happiness and distress, we'll get karma, and we go from body to body to body. So that's the result of our bondage and our conditioning. And so once you're conditioned, it's difficult to get out of that conditioning. And that is why, even in one lifetime, it is difficult to get out of your conditioning. Everybody is conditioned by their body. They identify with their body. I'm this body, that body, whatever. I got this characteristics. I act like this, and this is how I respond, and I can't do anything else. So that's our conditioning. And it's very difficult to change. So that is why people in this world, they keep on repeating the same mistakes and acting in the same way, even though it's not really beneficial for them. Because they're conditioning, and they can't get out of that condition. They're stuck there. Once they get a bad habit, they cannot change a bad habit, so to speak. A person who's, of course, you can develop a bad habit also, as intoxication, drinking, alcoholism, and then it's difficult to get out of it. That's another type of conditioning. That conditioning arises because chemicals go into your body, and they affect your nervous system and your brain, and then you say, this is nice. And this is pleasure, this is the goal. And then when you don't have that, you feel, this is not good. I want to get that again. Sometimes you go and drink again and get the pleasure again, or the drug or whatever. So you get conditioned to that experience. This is nice, which is this chemicals operating in your brain. So that's you say an imposed conditioning, an addiction. But then the greater conditioning is we're really attached to the material body. And we're stuck in the material body, and we're doing that. The psychologists sometimes say that your personality is molded in the first few months of your life when you come out of the womb. And whatever happens in those first few months, that will determine how you respond to the world the rest of your life. So in other words, all of your conditioning is put on you when you're 1 or 2 months old, just coming out of your mother. And then everything else is, you react to that conditioning, in terms of that conditioning, the rest of your life, and it's difficult to change it. Which is why when children are born, then they have to be treated very carefully. And which is why they don't even let the child go out of the house for 1 month, technically after they're born, according to Vedic tradition. And then they have a ceremony called Nishkramana, where they go out of the house for the first time after 1 month. And before that, nobody can see the child, and they want to protect the child. So that's, of course, modern psychology, that is only 2 months or 3 months or whatever it is to mold your character like that. But in one sense, it's true. But then we know, of course, we have another life before that condition us, another life before that. So those conditions are also pushing us, not just the first 3 months of our life, this life. We got all these other conditions from previous lifetimes pushing us also. So very difficult to escape. all this conditioning of the material world. And that's why it's difficult for people to change. Once they've developed from childhood, it's very difficult to change the way they act in whatever the rest of their life. It is possible, but difficult. Possible, but difficult. That is the challenge for spiritual life, because of all of that conditioning life after life. Very difficult to get rid of that ahankara and everything that follows after that. All the impressions, all the karmas, all the ahankara, all stuck in the subtle body. Very difficult to get rid of that. It's a big challenge. But it is possible if one endeavors. If we make an attempt, then good, we can do something. And that is why Krishna says, abhyasena tu konteya, vairagyena cha grihyate. Difficult to control the mind. But if you practice, and you detach yourself from things, certain things you don't do, avoid certain things, then you can control the mind. So it's possible, but it requires practice and detachment. And to do that, it requires some determination and some intelligence. So, that is why pursuing spiritual life is a little rare in this world, because not many people have that determination and intelligence to follow a process like that. If we follow the traditional processes, then naturally, if you progress through the gunas, then gradually you become detached and you develop control of the mind and control of the senses. So we see there the characteristics of the Brahmana. What is one characteristic? Sama, another is Dhamma. The control of the mind, control of the senses. These are natural characteristics of the Brahmana who is in Sattva Gun. So if you reach Sattva Gun, then naturally you control your mind and your senses. Easier. If you're in Tamagun, difficult, you can't do it. And therefore, it's difficult for the people in Tamagun and Rajagun to really advance spiritually. Those in Sattva Gun, yes, easier for them. So that's why we have a varnashram system to gradually elevate people upwards from the people who are rather hopeless at the bottom. Gradually they get trained up in a very, very slow, gradual manner, birth after birth, until they get to sattva. Then they can go quickly. The gunas of material nature themselves have been arranged by the Lord to help us spiritually. So that within the gunas, that is sattva gun, we got a little hope to get out of the material world, an escape hole, so to speak. Within sattva gun itself, there's a way you can get out of the material world. Otherwise, it's difficult. You can't do it. And the people don't even want to do it because there's so much in ignorance. So they're in the prison, and they don't think there's anything else except the prison, so they don't want to get out. So they just adapt to the prison, that's their conditioning. And if it's Tamagun prison, then they're in small little dark holes and miserable, etc., and whatever, have to work very hard. And they say, okay, that's life. As long as they get their food and they get a place to sleep, okay, fine. They tolerate the situation, that's their conditioning. And they may get a bigger place, bigger activity, more thing, and then think, oh, this is very nice, Rajagun. Or if it's in Sattva Gun, then of course, they get more luxury, more comforts, etc., like that. And they say, oh, that's very nice. It's all conditioning. It's all within the prison. But if it's Sattva Gun, then there is a way of getting out. There's a little trap hole, a little secret door you can get out of that. So this is the material world. Everyone is bound up and in general difficult to get out. And the varnashram system helps us. And then once you get the sattva gun, you can practice jnana and yoga. And if you do that properly, then you get out of the prison. That is liberation. But those two processes are also difficult. So, Krishna also provides another process, that is bhakti yoga. So this process is a little different from the other processes. It doesn't require gradual elevation to the gunas. but you can still get out. Of course, you do elevate, but you elevate not through varnashram, you elevate through bhakti. So bhakti is a way of getting out of the prison in a more direct way, not having to go up through the different levels of the prison until you get to the sattva-gun level and then you get the hole to get out. You can just get out from any level by practicing bhakti. So the process of bhakti is very quickly destroys this whole conditioning, which is said arises from ahankara and ignorance. So the process of bhakti destroys that. This, of course, is stated in the Nectar Devotion, where Rupa Goswami explains that the suffering of the material world is caused by karmas. Karmas are caused by actions. Actions are caused by desires. Desires are caused by ignorance. So all of these things are destroyed by bhakti. The ignorance, the desires, and the karmas are all destroyed by the process of bhakti. So the very root is the ignorance, and that gets destroyed also. And all the byproducts of that, the desires and the karmas and suffering, etc., all destroyed by process of bhakti. So that does not require you to come to sattva-gun to start. So that's why if you're at the bottom in tamagun, you can still do it if you have that faith, which means that you have that acceptance that we're not the body, the soul, and that there's Supreme Lord also. And we have the determination to get to that goal. Then we can begin the practice, whether we're in sattva-gun, rajagun, or tamagun. So that is how we defeat this problem we have here of being stuck in the material world and identifying with the material body, etc. We destroy all these concepts by the process of bhakti yoga. So the bhakti yoga becomes easier because though the goal, that is, the destruction of all the karmas, understanding your Atma, understanding and realizing the Supreme Lord, looks very far off. From the beginning of devotional service itself, we get an inspiration or a higher taste. And that is the Shakti of Bhakti itself, that it gives us some satisfaction. So the practice of Bhakti itself gives satisfaction to the jiva. And though we may not get immediate realization, we get some higher taste, some higher satisfaction, and this inspires us to go further and further and further in the process of bhakti until we get the perfection. Okay, any question there?
What specific activities of bhakti can accelerate that purification of ignorance and
Which particular, any activity of bhakti actually does this. If we look in Nectar Devotion, then Rupa Goswami says, bhakti has some special characteristics, 6 characteristics. And the first characteristic is kleshagni, destruction of suffering. And what is suffering? It is ignorance, it is desires, it is karmas. And all of these get destroyed by the process of bhakti, starting with the beginning of sadhana bhakti. So, sadhana bhakti does this. So, and then he gives the types of sadhana bhakti you can do. So he gives 64 types of devotional service, hearing, chanting, deity worship, association of devotees, living in the dham, offering obeisances, putting on tilak. All these destroy your karmas and destroy your ignorance. So just putting on tilak is destroys your ignorance and your karmas. And of course, the most powerful one is chanting the name of Krishna, which is illustrated in the case of Ajamil. He was not even doing bhakti, no faith, but also no aparads, but no faith. And simply by chanting once the name Narayan to name his son, all of his karmas got destroyed. So therefore bhakti is very powerful to cause great effects, destruction of all karmas by chanting once the name of Narayana. So if we chant with faith, of course we get much more effect. But we have to avoid the aparads or offenses. So, of course, it's usually a gradual affair. So we destroy our karmas, and then to destroy the desires, it takes a little more time, and to destroy the ahankara takes more time. So usually the ahankara gets destroyed in bhava stage. So that's where the avidya goes, and then the devotee feels that liberation is nothing because he's gone beyond liberation itself in the bhava stage. The destruction of the ignorance takes longer to accomplish. But any process of bhakti can do that. Offering respects to the deity, offering prayers, and taking prasadam, all these things can destroy all your karmas and destroy your desires, etc.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, in a previous class you had said that bhakti is above the gunas.
Yeah.
So my question is, does it lead to sattva guna, even though it's above it?
Yes, if it's above the gunas?
Practicing bhakti, if it's above the gunas, then practicing bhakti, will it automatically get one to sattva guna?
Well, beyond sattva guna. So bhakti is by nature nirguna, because it's part of Krishna's internal energy, which is beyond the gunas. So it's the essence of Krishna's spiritual energy. So it is beyond the gunas, or nirguna. It manifests in this world, and it may look like it's in the gunas because you can have tamagun bhakti, rajagun bhakti, or sattvagun bhakti. That's a contamination in our mind. It's not the bhakti itself. By performing bhakti, particularly pure bhakti, then if from tamagun we can rise up through sattvagun, but we surpass it. We surpass all the gunas through the process of bhakti. So we're not trying to attain sattvagun, because that's also a type of bondage in the material world. If you only go for sattvagun, then we may end up trying to get liberation. So getting impersonal mukti is maybe a characteristic of sattvagun. So then we won't go for bhakti then. So we avoid sattvagun also, and getting too attached to sattvagun.
Okay. So basically, if one is in ignorance, then his natural progression is passion or goodness, and then above. Practicing bhakti. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Maharaj, can you clarify the last two lines of the translation, the last line? It says that if the object of this journey and the path leading there were mine, there would be many troubles for me. But because they relate not to me but to my body, there is no trouble at all. What is that?
In this particular case, we have Rahuguna getting on a palanquin and people carrying it on a path because he wants to go in a particular place. And if you're going too slow and you're like this, I'll never get there. So this is a material destination that we determine. And I think this is where I want to go, etc. And this is how I'm going to get there. That's the path. So we have a process and a goal in mind, a material process and a material goal, a path or a road with a palanquin on it, and then object of his journey, maybe he wants to go to the next town or something like that. So this is our attachment. We have a certain goal in mind with all of our actions. And then, because it's the material world, we get obstacles to that, and then we feel disturbed. In this case, the disturbance is Jad Bharat not carrying the palanquin properly, and the king says, you're getting all bumps in my journey. So then he gets disturbed. But if we understand that this is just a superficial material goal for a material purpose, and we understand that we're actually a spirit soul beyond the material world, then we'll not be disturbed by all the obstructions that come on the path.
Trying to understand that aspect of practical application of bhakti as activity, and that involve the use of elements and also the awareness of the environment for the effectiveness of the purpose, because we want to achieve some kind of service, for example. So to be aware of that, the utility of the element, material in one sense, and maintain the concept that is spiritual, it would be, for example, like in this case, the text explain those goals are not mine because it's not related to me as a spiritual soul, but it's more material.
Yeah.
So that awareness, how we can reconcile those points.
Yeah, so the definition of sadhana bhakti is to engage the senses and mind, and the senses are generally considered to be material. And when we engage the senses, we end up with karma. That's the normal thing. But when we use the senses in a certain way, that is, anukulyena krishnanoselanam, when ani abhidashita shunya, then opposite. We destroy karma. So the senses don't give a material result if we use them in bhakti, which means we engage our senses for giving happiness to Krishna. That's anukulyena krishnanoselanam. With no other desires, then it doesn't give a material effect at all, even though we're engaging the senses. And we can engage objects. We offer a flower, we cook rice, offer it to the deity, even though it is so-called material, because we're engaging in Krishna service and offering it to his pleasure, then it loses its material qualities. And when we enjoy it, that is, we eat the rice, it's prasadam, we get spiritual result, not material result. So it's very interesting that the internal energy of Krishna, that bhakti, when it fuses our actions of the senses, then the objects and the senses connected with are no longer material. They have spiritual effect. So that's the power of bhakti itself. But that depends on the intention of the person. It's not just the engagement. You can offer to Krishna without devotion, then it doesn't have any effect, because Krishna doesn't accept it. So we have to have that intention of trying to please Krishna there. And then all these actions do have great power in them, and they take us out of, they destroy all karmas, etc. And not only destroy karmas, but the Atma develops more and more attraction for Krishna, more and more love for Krishna.
Can we understand the cultivation of that intention is gradual?
Yeah. The seed is shraddha, or faith, and when it turns into an action, that we actually do something, then it becomes bhakti. But in the beginning, of course, it is the intention to please Krishna is very little, because the faith is very little. And as the attraction for Krishna grows in the jiva, then the bhakti increases, and then the effect increases. It becomes more powerful as we progress in bhakti.
It's difficult to understand that only in the first 3 months of our childhood that the conditioning takes place, because we have the swabhava and prabhava. Swabhava is from the previous life.
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is modern science, modern psychology. Obviously, in the womb also there's some, but they say first 6 months or something, or first 5 months, yeah? Which indicates that it's, in one sense, good that you have to take care of your children when they're very, very young and protect them very nicely and take care of all their needs, and then they'll feel satisfied. And if you don't do that, then they become enemies of this world, and they think the world is persecuting me and this and that, and they start fighting with everybody, and they can't control themselves when they're grown up because they're so hostile. And that hostility came when they're small, 1 month old, 2 months old. They develop this hostility to their mother and their father and everybody else in the world because nobody treated them properly. So that's basically that. But of course we have previous lifetime and many previous lifetimes influences also there.
Now, Maharaj, I behave in a particular way, I'm conditioned because of what has been written in my mind, the previous samskara.
Yeah.
Impressions I'm carrying. Now, by using my intelligence, can I override on those impressions? I give new instructions by the intelligence to the mind, which can override on them.
Yes. So if we have intelligence and determination, then by practice, we change the habit. We can develop a new habit to replace an old habit. So, and that's why we practice something, we become good at it. And that's why in children, you go to school, why? So they can practice writing the letters, A, B, C. So this is you're putting something into them. It's already there. You're creating a new habit, and then it gets stuck there for the rest of their life. Yeah? Then you can replace that with another language later on. They can learn another language, so you can increase them that way. Yeah? So that's how you can change. But some things are so ingrained, it's very difficult to change. Those things that are stuck in when you're 2 months old or 3 months old, those things may be very difficult to change in some cases. So that's why it's difficult to train some children. They refuse to go to school, they refuse to learn, they refuse to follow their parents because something happened when they're very, very young, and then they're hostile to everybody. So they don't want to learn any of that. They have a completely different idea of the world.
Utilizing the subtle energies can be conducive for that aim?
Well, what does subtle energy mean? That means the subtle body, actually.
Yeah.
And in the subtle body, we do have all of our karmas, our previous desires, etc. And then, as I said, you can also put inputs into there, by putting new thoughts into there, or new feelings into there. So we can influence that subtle body by different things, just as you can influence the gross body by different types of food. Sattva-gun food, Rajagun food, or Tamagun food, or Sattva-gun music, Rajagun music, Tamagun music affect the body. They also they affect the subtle body. So many things affect the subtle body. So you can, by changing the gunas of things, you can start changing your subtle body as well as your gross body. So therefore these things are effective to also start changing your mind a little bit and making it a little more sattvic, and then you give up certain tamasic habits or whatever. Bye.
Primarily we are all, Krishna says in 14th chapter, Madhye Tishtati Rajasaha. Primarily on this planet, the overarching layer is mode of passion. Within that passion, maybe somebody is in mode of goodness, somebody is in mode of passion, somebody is in mode of ignorance.
Yeah. So we're the middle earth, so to speak, middle little place. So this is passion, and then we go above that to Svargaloka, then it's Sattva. We go below, then it gets tamasic down to the lower planetary system. So that's general. And then within that, then we get grades also. And we have different varshas and different dvipas also. And in those dvipas, they're more sattvic. In those varshas, they're more sattvic. There's like Bhoma Svarga, that is a heavenly planet on earth. So if you go to Kimpurusha Varsha or Hari Varsha or Kuru Varsha, all these other varshas, Ila Vrita Varsha, then basically it's more sattvic. And we come to Bharat Varsha, this is where we get Varnashram, where we get Sudras, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, Brahmanas, and then like this. So a mixture there. Basically, we say it's Rajagun. And if you're in Rajagun, you can get born back on earth.
Maharaj, in the first canto, in the realizations of Narada Muni, and after he got his mother passed and he was more dedicated to wandering and practice austerities, he was more into modes of goodness, and he got the vision of Vishnu, the Paramatma, but then Paramatma disappeared, and he said, because you are more attached to the mode of goodness.
Bhava and prema, so it's all bhakti actually. So his initial faith was caused by association with the devotees and taking their prasadam remnants, and then he developed faith, and then he began to hear from them, so it's bhajana kriya, and gradually his gunas dissipated, and anartana vritti, he got nishta, and he went to ruchina sakti through the hearing process, shravana, mainly hearing. And at a certain point in bhava, I suppose, then he had a vision of the Lord, and the Lord spoke to him, and he said, but then the Lord said, I'm not going to appear to you in this lifetime, because he had to get pure. And so his longing for the Lord created more purification, and then he got prema at the end of his life. So basically it's progress of bhakti. Okay, Hare Krishna.